Hey guys, in this video, I wanted to take a few moments to demonstrate how to receive an invoice payment against an invoice in the field worker application using the Fusion Pay by Service Fusion integration. And guys, just as the name suggests, an invoice payment certainly is received against the invoice, but I wanted to start this process inside of a job that hasn't been invoiced yet. And the reason why I wanted to start the process there is it's important to note that before the job is invoiced, if you try to receive a payment in the field worker application, you would do that here on the Invoice tab in the field worker application. And at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a very large red payment button, but this is specifically for a job deposit. So in order for this to be an invoice payment that we receive inside of the field worker application, first we would need to invoice this job. And in order to invoice the job, I would go to the status button in the top left corner of the job screen. So I'll actually click where it says dispatched. I can see other statuses I could choose from for this job, but because we want to invoice it, we want it to be in that completed status. So I'm going to choose the completed status as the technician using the field worker application. Because there's only one technician assigned to this job, when I change my status to completed, the overall job status changes to completed. And therefore, I can now choose to invoice this job. And so you'll see where before the last option on the Invoice tab showed Apply Deposit, it now shows Finalize Invoice. So I would choose to finalize the invoice. And now I need to leave this job screen and travel back into this job in order to process this as an invoice payment. So we'll take a look at what that process looks like. So what I want to do is actually click the back button in the top left corner of the screen. And now we want to travel to the past section. Even though the job was dated for today, because I've completed it, it's now going to filter over to the past section and in the complete section, which is the default whenever we travel to past. So in this example, it's going to be the last job in the invoice status listed with today's date. And we'll select the Invoice tab, which will allow us to travel into the job. And then very similar to how we travel to the Invoice tab as a part of the job, we'll do the same now. And what we'll see, instead of seeing a lot of those green options, add product, add service, because this is now an invoice, we instead have invoice options. And so we'll select the invoice options. And so you can see several of the options that are associated with this invoice in the field worker application, notably the ability to distribute this invoice via email or even to have a print preview on your mobile device. We can, of course, also choose to return to the job, but guys, in this case, we're going to choose the first option, Apply Payment. And this is how we can receive the invoice payment in the field worker application. So we'll choose to apply payment. And the screen then refreshes to a Receive Payment screen. And the very first thing we want to do on this screen is to select the payment method. Now, guys, we do have a separate video that explains the payment methods that are associated with the Fusion Pay integration specifically. And if you're not sure which payment methods to choose from for the integration, make sure to check that video out, and it'll help you understand which payment methods are created directly as a result of the integration. And those are the ones that we can use to process payments directly through this field worker application. So American Express, as you can see, is the first one that it defaults to. It's the first one listed in that dropdown. In this example, we'll simply choose MasterCard as our payment type. And then, guys, next you can see you have a couple of different options. One, to either enter the information in manually, or second, to use a card reader. It's important to note that Use Card Reader is currently a placeholder for future use, so we want to continue with the selected option of Enter Manually. Next, we have the credit card field, and so this is supposed to be the number field for the credit card itself. What you'll want to do in this field is click the drop-down arrow, and then you're exposed to two separate options. I can choose to add new if I didn't already have a card that was on file for this customer. I can also then choose an existing card on file if we see one that's present in this drop-down list. In this example, we'll go ahead and choose the MasterCard that we see on file. We can see the first two characters in this credit card field now reflect the same as the payment method. And then we see the last four digits of that card number present as well. Once we selected the card on file information, guys, we can see the remainder of the fields that it wants us to populate get filled in automatically. And then lastly, the only other option is to go ahead and submit this invoice payment. You'll notice that the field worker application notices a slight hesitation while the payment processes. And then we're presented with a notification that the payment was received successfully. We see the authorization number along with the transaction token. And then, guys, we have a few different options that are associated with payment reception activities. The very first one of those being, of course, get a customer signature. It might make a lot of sense if I just received an invoice payment to then also get a post-work authorization signature from the customer, and that's what this first option encourages us to do. The second option, of course, guys, if we want to email this invoice that the payment has now updated the total due amount for, I could certainly email that invoice out to the customer with the second option. Guys, that view job details will actually take me back to that main invoice job screen that we were looking at prior to, where we initiated the travel into invoice options. And lastly, guys, if the customer says, oh, you know what, I actually needed to use a different card than what you had on file, we could very easily void that payment from this screen as well. And that's what it looks like to receive an invoice payment in the field worker application using the Fusion Pay integration by Service Fusion.